All right, QB rises and falls. So these are the people who have risen based off their week 5 performance or their week 5, something that happened in week 5. In terms of fantasy, risen and fallen. Starting with your risers, who have you got in the QB spot?
I'll go with Big Ben of the Steelers. He's another bloke I doubted in coming into the year, and every week he just puts out 300 yards and a few touchdowns. And I believe he's averaging over 20 fantasy points a week. So for me, he's genuinely in that top 10 QB conversation.
Yeah, he's so reliable. Like I think every score he's gotten over the 4 matches he's played, they've all been within like 3 points of each other or something. So he's just consistently putting up the same numbers. He doesn't have the highest ceiling, but definitely someone you're happy to rely on, especially if you have him as a QB2 in a 2 quarterback league. You would be very chuffed to have him there. Just you can back him in to do well every single week, basically.
Yeah. And his weapons look really good as well, and a great offensive line.
Yeah. And he's probably only going to get better from here because, he had a whole year off last season. So the chemistry with the new receivers and stuff, it's going to get better from here, I'd say. My riser, we talked about him last week in the exact same section, but I'm backing him in again.
Yeah.
He is now up to currently he's my QB7 in my rolling rankings. It's Justin Herbert. I have to say, I only just considered this as I was talking about it, so I'm not sure why I've done that to myself. But he did have an OT. They did have an extra, like an overtime in this match, so his score was probably a little bit inflated. But 27.36 against a Saints defense who's normally pretty good. This year, the stats probably don't say that, but they're normally a pretty good defense. In the prime time, the big lights, all the pressure was on. This is when the young quarterbacks usually just choke and do nothing. And he's put up 27.36 fantasy points. That's now 3 20-plus scores against good defenses. He's put in his short time in the league. He's got a favourable draw to come after the bye this week. They've got the Jags, the Raiders, the Dolphins, and the Jets in their next 5. They've got one tough match in there. I can't remember who it is, but the other 4 matches, all very likable matchups for young Justin. And yeah, Keenan Allen was out for most of the match. I can't even remember what day it was. I think it was Tuesday or Monday. It was Tuesday. Tuesday for us, Monday in the US. Keenan Allen was out for most of it. Eckler's out now, so they're going to be throwing more. I just think there's not really anything negative to say about Herbert. Where do you have him now in your rankings, roughly?
Yeah, he's similar to Big Ben, like in that top 10 conversation now. The bloke's an absolute baller, and he's not just he. We saw last week he can throw the ball deep as well, which is just makes him so much better. And he's like mobile as well, so he can scramble if he wants to. And he's just a lot better than everyone thought. So yeah, he's an absolute gem if you've got him on your fantasy squad.
Yeah, fair play. We're not too happy about him because James Curtis, who's always on this podcast on the NFL episodes, he snagged him up on the waivers the week he was started because Tyra was injured. Despite him claiming this against this, he wasn't the starter at the time. He was just filling in for 1 week. It's an absolute fluke pickup. I'm not happy about it, and he's landed an absolute gem. So now, fair play, Curtis. But yeah, he's definitely a riser for me. Do you have anyone else you want to mention?
No, they were my 2, Big Ben and Herbert.
All right, yeah. So Ryan Fitzpatrick, obviously a rise. We talked about what he did this week. So yeah, 4 matches in a row of 20 plus. And yeah, I think he should be a starter in every 2 quarterback league at the moment. Because I have to say, I had high expectations for the Fitz, and it's come through nicely.
You were high on him.
Yeah, sadly, all my high draft picks, my gambles didn't pay off like it did with the Fitz. But Andy Dalton, my final riser, I don't want to go into him because obviously we have no stats. But where do you have Andy Dalton in the rankings? How bullish are you on him?
Yeah, look, it's a tough one. definitely he's not up there with Justin Herbert for me, just because it is Andy Dalton, and the bloke got benched at the Bengals last season. But the system that he's in will definitely give him a lot of opportunity to get a lot of yards. So yeah, it'll be an interesting one.
Yeah, he's my QB 17 right now. Um, I'd be very interested in picking him up off the waiver wire, but all three of my quarterbacks I have above him, so I don't really know how I'll be able to do it. Yeah, I just have him right at. I feel like there's kind of three or four tiers of quarterbacks. So you've got like the elite top five. Then there's kind of a pack below that. You've got like Brady, Stafford, Tannehill, Watson. And then for me, Dalton's just below that pack. So like he's not as good as a quarterback as those guys, but his situation is probably better than theirs, and his weapons are probably better. But yeah, I probably won't be picking him up just because I rate my three quarterbacks above him. But I definitely think in two quarterback leagues out there, if you're struggling and have a pretty average quarterback, I would definitely be looking at Dalton right now. Especially if you can drop someone who's not doing that well, you can suss it out this week, see how he goes, and it's um, a bit of a win-win situation, really. So yeah, who's your faller in the quarterback position?
Well, basically all three quarterbacks that I own in fantasy, Danny Dimes, Matt Ryan, and Joe Burrow. I think the highest scorer was about 7.5 out of the three of them. But
I don't think Danny Dimes can fall any lower, to be
yeah,
honest.
so he I didn't have him down. I'd say
Yeah.
Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan's the main one. Just it's the Falcons just stink. Their O line stinks, and he also needs Julio Jones back ASAP, which you also need that because he's in your team. But yeah, I think he's definitely a faller. But once Julio comes back, and hopefully they don't go to shit with the changing coach, but he should bounce back because his weapons are still really good in Ridley, Julio, Hurst, etc.
Yeah, I can't lie. Yes, he did really bad, but I actually don't have him too low in my rankings. I've got him as my QB 14, so could
Yeah,
get a deal done there, mate.
I still had the reason he's a faller for me is because he was still in my top 8 before this week.
Okay, yeah,
So yeah,
yeah, that's a bit ambitious from you, my friend. After an 11 and a 12, but yeah, I don't know. I think the new coach, well, the interim coach, I think that often works in an offense's favor. Like we saw it with Deshaun Watson on
yeah,
the weekend. I know it was against the Jags, but he put up nearly 25, easily his best score of the season so far. So I think sometimes, and we see it in pretty much every sport around the world, really, when a coach gets sacked, sometimes that can um, the players can have a new lease on life, really, and they can just start letting loose. So I kind of am a bit worried about Todd Gurley, though, because I feel like Matt Ryan's might start balling out again. But anyway, yeah, I'm not too down on Matt Ryan, but yeah, definitely can't be scoring below 7 if you want to be like an elite quarterback. So yeah,
yeah.
not ideal from him.
That's it's 2 weeks in a row that he hasn't put up a touchdown. So that definitely should change.
Yeah, hope so. Um, my main faller is my man Lamar Jackson. Look,
Mm,
he had an I don't know. It's a tough one with him. I've been toying with it all day about like I honestly have been getting anxiety about Lamar Jackson. For those who don't know and don't listen to the podcast often, or this is their first time, I drafted Lamar Jackson with the second pick of the what's our league called?
Fantasy footy,
Oh, that's pretty original.
Superflex, 2 quarterback league.
Yeah, so I drafted him pick two, very high on him. I thought he was going to average about three or four more than the QB two, and he's currently stinking it up, as Pilch would say. And this game against the Bengals, yes, the Bengals defense has actually been surprisingly improved this season. But you thought it would have been the perfect bounce back game for him and the Ravens as a team, to be honest. But he decided to whip out 13.5. Almost cost me my season, to be honest, as I was 0-4 and had to win this week. And he's my main man, who I would back myself in to be able to rely on. Decided to pump out that. Um, But yeah, he's been injured recently, so that's not ideal. You don't want that in a player who's like questionable every couple weeks. His team's not playing well on offense at all. He's not been rushing that much this season like he was last year, and his team's averaging less than 3 touchdowns a game so far this season. And they've got tougher fixtures to come than what they've already had. So yeah, big concerns over Lamar Jackson. I'm definitely considering drafting him away, trading him away. Right now, my dilemma is how would like. All right, it's March. It's March 2021, and I'm going to sleep. Am I sleeping better if I've kept him all season and he's just underperformed, or am I sleeping better if I bring someone in, they flop, and he goes back to being beast? Like, I don't know.
You're definitely sleeping worse with the latter option there.
Yeah, the only thing is, I am a proactive fantasy coach. I trade people too often, and however, that's fun. So I don't know. I'm tempted to see what I can get for him on the market, but I do think in our league of people who don't know too much about in real life NFL, I think his value would be a lot lower than it would be in a normal league. But yeah, very worried about Lamar.
That's my exact problem. No one wants any of my players because they're all averaging about 5 less than what they should be at the moment.
Yeah,
which sucks balls, but
yeah. So I might be using Fitzy to my advantage for that reason. But yeah, do you have anyone else you want to mention here?
No, mate. My 3 boys, I already mentioned them. Joey Burrow,
Yeah, Joe Burrow is probably lucky to not have an in-depth look here.
Look, it's same with Matt Ryan. It's the situation that he's in. Arguably the worst offensive line, and they were playing the Ravens, who are an unreal defense, but he's got a tough fixture, so definitely a bit worried.
Yeah, someone else I wanted to mention was Kirk Cousins against Seattle, who so far have been one of the worst defenses in the league, been shipping so many points fantasy-wise. And he only put out 14.16. And yeah, I've never really rated him, especially as a fantasy option. But I know he's probably a starter in most 2-quarterback leagues. And yeah, for me, that performance on the weekend, he's not had the greatest start to the season, but if he put up, a 20-25 against Seattle, all of a sudden you start to think, well, maybe he's an all right QB2 option in a 2 QB league. But yeah, for me, he shouldn't be starting in a 2 QB league when he's putting up 14 against one of the worst defenses in the comp. So yeah, I'm well and truly off the Kirk Cousins fantasy bandwagon. So yeah.
It's a miracle! Oh yeah! What about that one? Unbelievable! Balotelli, Aguero! Crowd cheers. Here's Siddle.